Do you think it's racist to hire based on race?
Are you kidding me? We can have diversity and we can have merit.
People should be hired on their merit, not on the color of their skin.
No. Do you have a explanation for that?
No.
I mean, I got the job. So.
So today I'm out here and the question I'll be asking is, what are your thoughts on diversity hiring?
I don't think you should be having following a quota, I need 18 women in my workforce. I think a lot of media has it construed a little bit. Some people are either on opposite ends of the extreme.
I think it's very cool and base to make sure you have a diverse workplace, and whatever you have to do to make sure that's the case is fine by me.
There's just no need for it, I don't think. People should be hired on their merit, not on the color of their skin.
Well, I think it's a positive thing. Everybody needs a fair shake, I think.
Do you feel like you were ever just hired based on your race?
Yes, actually, I think that they were looking to make their staff more diverse, so they chose me.
How did that make you feel?
I'm fine with it because, I mean, I got the job. So.
If a company is hiring exclusively on the basis of creating a diverse workforce for their company, I don't think that they should hire based solely on race, but rather on who's the most qualified applicant.
So at this point, I'm sure you've heard about DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, but some people have called it discrimination, exclusion, and inequality. So to find out what's really going on, I interviewed hiring managers anonymously so they don't get fired. And as someone who actually worked for a Fortune 500 company as of 3 months ago, I wanted to explore both sides on what's going on. Because do we truly want diversity and equality, or is it all just for show? I guess we'll see, but let's start with some interviews. Do you think it's racist to hire based on race?
I don't think it's racist. I think it's a limited mindset for sure. I don't know. I think that it shouldn't even be a factor that you look into.
Just looking at it from on the surface level, I think so, yeah.
No, because I think it's kind of the argument with the Black Lives Matter movement. They're not saying Black Lives Matter more. We're just trying to put emphasis on the fact that there have been things in the past that have put certain people of color down, and this is just another one of those types of movements.
My name is Lily Zhang. I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist and consultant.
What are your thoughts on diversity hiring?
This is kind of a funny question for me because a lot of people think diversity hiring and merit-based hiring are opposites. The really funny thing is that they're the exact same thing. The major misconception about diversity hiring is that we're going in and we're just handing jobs away to people who aren't qualified and saying we're going to give them more jobs at the expense of the qualified people. Not only does that not happen, that's also extremely illegal. What diversity hiring actually is actually trying to fix the existing biases in the hiring and recruitment process.
Well, nice to meet you. Talking to one of my subscribers right now, I want to kind of just give a brief introduction of what you do.
I'm in senior leadership for we'll call it a Fortune 100 company, about 100,000 employees. Been in my industry for a little bit over 25 years.
What are your thoughts on diversity hiring?
To me, it's a terrible idea. You can't look at a person and tell who you're dealing with. And also the things that make a person diverse aren't physically visible. I want to find people who approach problems different ways, and choosing skin color or gender does not tell me how a person problem solves.
So what's important to remember though is that none of this is new, as in the DEI. DEI in corporate America has existed since the mid-1960s from the Equal Pay Act, age discrimination, and affirmative action signed by JFK. But over the last few years, there's definitely been more focus. Okay, so what's exactly happening then? Well, since 2020, with movements like Black Lives Matter and increased awareness with LGBTQ members, DEI standards have become more enforced. Many companies and schools now have mandatory diversity trainings and workshops to close the gap and foster better relations. And big companies are now showing that with these pledges. MasterCard has pledged that women will earn $1 for every $1 a man earns, and Johnson & Johnson has aimed for 50% women in management globally. But is this push coming from this company's desire to want to be good? I mean, that's for you to decide. Because now to be listed on stock exchanges like NASDAQ, firms like Apple and Tesla must have 2 diverse directors such as women, minorities, or LGBTQ+ to stay involved. And not only that, firms are now scored on these measures to hit more money. Diversity is now included as part of their ESG scores that evaluates a firm's environmental, social, and governance issues. And these scores directly impact the firm's ability to secure more money at cheaper rates, since they will now be perceived less risky higher the score. So money talks, because companies are now incentivized to enforce diversity. And so that's exactly why it may not be such a surprise that the DEI industry is now worth $3.4 billion. And so with the corporations pushing this now more than ever, it made me think on what exactly the employees themselves think about all this. Well, I guess that's why I wanted to make this video. Because today, when we're facing a loneliness crisis, you can be canceled for sharing your true opinions. There aren't many outlets where you can share how you really feel. And bro, like, especially in the workplace, trust me, I was in corporate just 3 months ago. And for myself, ever since I've left the job to go all in on this mission of building the next big middle ground media company, I can't lie, man, it's been hard. But look, I'm self-aware enough to say boo who, because obviously it's a massive privilege to be able to make a living talking shit in front of a camera, but at the same time it does make it harder to talk about my struggles without feeling like I'm complaining. So I was curious on whether other people had outlets outside of school and work to talk about controversial topics like diversity hiring or whatever struggles that they're going through. Do you feel like you have people in your life where you can talk about anything with?
Not a ton. I don't really like to talk about what's going on that much, I feel like.
Is it like uncomfortable to do so?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Have you heard of our sponsor, BetterHelp?
No, I haven't.
So BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give advice in a helpful and unbiased way. So you go on their site to answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who's experienced helping people just like you and I. And you can do it all from your phone or computer via video chat, phone call, or messaging. Do you think you'll try it?
Sure. Is there a promo code though?
Oh, there is. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/gen, and get 10% off your first month of therapy with BetterHelp. You think you'll sign up?
Yeah, I'm all over that.
Okay, with that said then, how much responsibility do you think that companies should have over societal issues?
So much. So many. They are much larger and more powerful entities than like individual people. And so if anyone's able to make change in the world, it's up to them.
I do think that companies all have a responsibility to be aware of and conscious of how the social conversation is evolving. If a company kind of acts with impunity and doesn't really stay in tune with what society, with what real people want, then it's going to become irrelevant.
I think the larger companies should play a larger role just because they have more impact. Let's say Apple, for example, or Google. They have a worldwide global impact.
I guess also like maybe small businesses also don't have the luxury to choose from such a pool of applicants as well, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, you don't have thousands of people applying to your business per day or week.
I actually personally don't think they should give about any of the political issues. I'm a big capitalist, so like the only thing that should really matter is just how the company can survive, how can they make a profit, and how that profit could be generated, like split amongst all the employees out there.
How much responsibilities do you think companies should be taking regarding societal issues?
None. Let's face it, it's a tool to cover horrible things they're doing. I mean, we see companies like Apple using lines with African children to get things for batteries in Africa, but then turning around and talking about social awareness issues and cultural issues. I'm like, you're not practicing what you preach. I just find it all very, very hypocritical and unnecessarily divisive too.
But for some business leaders, they definitely have some clear opinions on this. Chip Wilson, founder and former CEO of Lululemon, is not a fan of the brand's new direction. But why? Well, in a recent Forbes interview, he called the models unhealthy, sickly, and not inspirational. And when they asked him about Lululemon's decision to extend into plus sizes, at least bro stood on business.
I think through this whole diversity and inclusion, trying to become like the Gap, everything to everybody. You're not everything to everybody.
And this all kind of makes sense, and at least he's consistent, because even the name Lululemon was specifically chosen with 3 L's because the sound doesn't exist in Japanese phonetics. And he specifically said that he chose it because it's funny to watch Japanese people try and say it. Well, guess what, buddy? I'm Japanese and I can say that shit perfectly. Lululemon, bitch. Anyways, Wilson removed himself from the brand in 2015, but what it seems is that even after his departure, there's been diversity issues within the company. It brings up the question of, do these inclusivity pledges and diversity trainings even do anything, or does it make things worse? Because obviously not every company thinks the same, but they should at least be consistent. And what I found is that there's 2 schools of thought. Just a few weeks ago, Elon blasted the DEI that discrimination on the basis of race, which DEI does, is literally the definition of racism. Then Mark Cuban responded that good businesses look for talent where others don't, and that extending the hiring search, you can find people that are more qualified, and inclusion allows employees, no matter who they are, to feel comfortable in their own environment. So now you can see how a Twitter or X war is happening. Elon then responds and trolls by asking, when should we expect to see a short, white or Asian woman on the Dallas Mavs, in which Cuban is the owner of? Okay, no matter what side you're on, that's pretty funny. But what this does show is the different perspectives and viewpoints on DEI from two billionaire owners. But to be fair to Cuban, there is research that supports his arguments. McKinsey research found that DEI expands the search for top talent and in turn leads diverse companies to make more money compared to others in their industries. But does causation equal correlation? Because if a company can prioritize diversity in its hiring, doesn't it also just show that it has the finances and resources to even prioritize that? Like, obviously different scale, but can a mom and pop restaurant afford to prioritize diversity in its hiring compared to like a McDonald's? So enough yapping, because I was curious to hear what the people think. Because at least for me, I think most people can agree that having a fair and equal shot is something that we can all strive for. But again, is DEI initiatives effective for that? Or is it all just to check a box? Do you think diversity initiatives sometimes prioritizes optics over actual inclusion?
Only when it's not in good faith. Yeah.
What are some examples when it's like not in good faith?
When someone's not looking at applications at all and they're simply just looking at like stats and data.
But let me ask you this though, if we just only base hiring based on, let's say, merit though, wouldn't that sometimes be at risk for less diversity?
I don't think so, because I know people that are like really intelligent have just that instinct that they're not going to get it because of what they look like, so they don't do it. So yeah, I think there would be more diversity if people actually like tried.
Man, I think so, just because I've been in environments where we've had a diverse workforce, but maybe not the most qualified personnel for the job. And so I think my job could have gone easier if we'd have had more qualified applicants as opposed to just having a diverse organization.
It should strictly be merit. And you can look at sports and realize how ridiculous the idea of hiring on anything other than merit is. How many people in the NBA are under 6 foot tall? How many people in the general population are under 6 foot tall? Probably 90%. Do we expect that to improve the product if we suddenly make the NBA be 80%, 90%, 5'9" and under? It's going to be a very different game. You're not going to get a good product.
We can have diversity and we can have merit. We get diversity by really, sourcing a wide net, by making sure that our candidate pool reflects the diversity of our country. And then from that pool, we hire based on merit. This idea that it's a trade-off is a huge myth.
Do you think emphasis on diversity could lead to reverse discrimination?
No, because it just doesn't.
Do you have a explanation for that?
No.
Do you think it's racist to hire based on race?
Yes, even that question provides its own answer. Anytime you're basing any decision solely on race, you're approaching the problem wrong.
So it makes you think, because what happens when one side can argue that diversity was prioritized over merit?
Welcome, and welcome back to Harvard.
Claudine Gay was the first black president for Harvard, and it sparked celebration across the campus when she was elected as one. But after just 6 months, in the shortest tenure in Harvard's history, she stepped down. And how it led to that all started on December 5th.
Harvard ranks the lowest when it comes to protecting Jewish students. Your testimony today not being able to answer with moral clarity speaks volumes. It is anti-Jewish hate crimes.
That was Republican Elise Stefanik calling for Gay's resignation at the congressional hearing regarding on-campus anti-Semitism, where 70 congressional representatives called for the president's resignation. Since the start of the war, many protests occurred on campus, and Gay faced controversy for not condemning or addressing pro-Palestine statements signed by more than 30 student groups.
We do not punish or sanction people for expressing such views.
And in response, Gay said that many people confuse the right to free expression with the idea that Harvard will condone calls for violence against Jewish students. And this led to Gay and Harvard receiving significant backlash from donors and political interests, as we covered in our free newsletter, Bridging the Bias, link in bio. But that's not the only thing that Gay came under scrutiny for, because just 6 days later, this article got published. And what author and conservative activist Christopher Rufo found was that there were nearly 50 instances of alleged plagiarism in Gay's academic writing. So what it seems is that her academic achievements were over-exaggerated. But despite all these attacks, Harvard's board stood by Gay, as well as many on the left who defended her.
This was all a sham. What they wanted was to get this black woman out at Harvard University.
That was Jason Johnson, and he and many others on the left believed that this was a racist, coordinated attack to bring down Harvard's first ever black president. And that could be a valid point. Christopher Rufo said in a tweet that he wanted to topple gay by coordinating media stories across the political spectrum. And in an interview, he admitted to shaming and bullying reporters on the left until they took the clouding gay story seriously. So as these problems started getting revealed and after pressure from Congress, media, and donors, on January 2nd, Gay resigned from her presidency, but as of today, she's still a faculty member at Harvard. So could this be a racist conservative attack to undermine the future of DEI, or was Claudine Gay's resignation justified?
Probably not, to be honest with you. I don't think that that was a merited resignation. I think that wealthy board members were pro-Israel and therefore she got fired. Harvard is a business. They have wealthy donors. A lot of those donors are Jewish. They were mad, and so she got fired. So is it fair? Probably not. Is it the way the cookie crumbles because Harvard's a business? Yeah.
It's complex because there's many layers to this story, but did make me think. Because if the goal of acceptance is to bring more voices to the table, why is there so much discomfort around this topic of diversity hiring when people can't even talk about it without fear of being fired? So again, is the goal of all this just to check a box? Is the debate over diversity hiring more about principles or discomfort with change?
I think it's discomfort with change, honestly, at the moment, just from what I've seen and read online. Because if it was about principles, what principles are there that prevent you from hiring people of color? To me, I would have to say, in my opinion, it's the change.
Is diversity hiring a genuine effort for equality or a form of tokenism?
I think it can be a little of both. I recognize that the efforts for diversity hiring is to be more inclusive. That should be recognized and maybe even applauded, but I think that also there is some, how'd you say, tokenism? Yeah, I think there is some of that in play as well. You definitely want to have a diverse workforce, and you don't want to be seen as racist. An environment or a workforce that is less diverse can contribute to more racism, I think.
You're probably not going to hire someone if you don't think they fit the description, whether they look like how you want them to do or not.
But didn't you say that you felt like you got hired once because of your race?
Yes, but I think that I'm able to do my job well enough that they hired me, for sure. I mean, if you can't do your job well, they're not going to hire you.
I think it just depends on how you're going about it. I think if you're going about it in a malicious way or with malicious intent, it could be a form of tokenism. But if it's pure and with good intention, then it's the other way.
And something to consider is that when companies make business decisions through the eyes of diversity, are there going to be instances when people feel like they just got screwed?
I'm Rachel Nichols, ESPN.
Rachel Nichols was with ESPN for a combined 14 years and was even nominated for Outstanding Sports Personality and Studio Host in the 2021 Sports Emmy Awards. And for years, her goal was to host the NBA Finals pregame and halftime shows with her show, The Jump. And she was actually lined up to do so, but in 2020, things changed.
It was 2020. We had a pandemic, the tragic murder of George Floyd, a lot of difficult conversations with this country looking itself in the face.
But it wasn't just the world that was changing, things were also changing at ESPN.
The New York Times did an expose in July of 2020 on racism at ESPN and the lack of opportunities for people of color.
And feeling the pressure, ESPN decided to do something about it by asking Nichols to step aside for Maria Taylor, a black female colleague, to host the finals instead.
And they stressed it was my choice. They weren't telling me to do this because it was in my contract, but they were putting a lot of pressure on me.
And so, understandably frustrated, Nichols wanted to vent and get some advice with a trusted friend. But when what was supposed to be a private phone conversation was then leaked, it showed exactly why this video topic is so controversial. Let's listen together.
They said to me, hey, instead of hosting the NBA Finals, why don't you do Doris' Salmon reporter job for the NBA Finals? For Maria to do the hosting role. So, I have declined. I don't know what their next move is, but they are feeling pressure because of all of that. And I wish Maria Taylor all the success in the world. She covers football, she covers basketball, but to give her more things to do because you're feeling pressure about your crappy one-time record on diversity, which, by the way, I myself know personally from the female side of it, go for it. Just, find it somewhere else. You're not going to find it with me.
So you can let me know in the comments what you think about what she said, but how did this even get leaked in the first place? During pandemic protocols, ESPN issued new equipment to have people record remotely. And so when the conversation was being broadcasted at the ESPN headquarters in Bristol, this led to one of the employees to start recording it on a cell phone.
And at least one person started spying on me like I was their own personal television show, and they started recording my conversation on their cell phone.
So as you can guess, it was then later shared company-wide. Maria Taylor still ended up hosting the 2020 NBA Finals, and it actually appeared that everyone moved on and both sides actually benefited. But everything changed a year later when just before the 2021 NBA Finals, this situation was made public with this New York Times article.
I thought we had put things behind us. Unfortunately, I think there were still some people who had bad feelings. They held on to this tape for a year.
So even after a public apology, ESPN then removed her as a sideline reporter for the finals, canceled The Jump, and Nichols left the network, and people definitely had different reactions to the controversy. While ESPN president Jimmy Pitaro reiterated that Maria Taylor was picked to be host of the finals based on merit, not diversity, there's definitely been some divisive reactions as an aftermath to what happened. While some would say Nichols was a victim of the increasing pressure for diversity, some black ESPN employees shared in the New York Times article that they found what Rachel Nichols said as common criticism used by white workers to diminish non-white colleagues. But unlike many stories around diversity hiring, there were some positives to this. After settling with ESPN, today Nichols works at Fox Sports, and while Maria Taylor turned down a salary increase of $1 million to $5 million annually from ESPN, she does now work at NBC Sports. But on the negative side, what this story highlights though is that companies really only care about diversity when it's beneficial. So it's becoming clear that in many instances it's to check a box. And so now I wanted to ask the most important question I had on my mind going into this, because are we even focusing on the right type of diversity?
Should we prioritize diversity of race or diversity of thought?
So diversity of thought comes naturally when you have diversity of everything else. I once worked with a very old traditional finance company, right, a small one, and it seemed like everyone in it was a white dude, and they had all gone to Ivy League schools. And they were all rich, and they all had MBAs. No diversity of thought. Like, you asked a question in a room, and they all solved the problem in the exact same way.
Should we prioritize diversity of race or diversity of thought?
Diversity of thought, 100%. There is real discrimination that goes on, particularly in my field. I encourage people to look into what is known as caste discrimination. It's a huge problem in my field. It comes over from India. It's based on the caste system. I have one particular employee who, every time I would have him speak with another Indian employee, he would always ask me the last name. I was like, why do you always ask me that? And he said, because with the last name, I can tell where they're from and what caste they're probably from. He was from a lower caste in Mumbai. A lot of people from higher caste would refuse to work with him or would be disrespectful to him, even here, even in the US.
So despite what we're told, is it always the best idea to see race in everything? We often don't talk about the other forms of diversity that's just as or more important. And recently, I even hosted a middle ground debate between autistic and neurotypical people, and it was clear that diversity hiring in terms of giving people an opportunity to those who may never ever get a shot makes sense. But wait, as some of the autistic people shared, they also don't want to feel like a token. Because who the hell does? The last thing that anyone wants to feel like, even if it's not true, is the feeling that the only reason you got something was because of your race. And I bet you that's a big reason why Maria Taylor declined a 400% salary increase. And to a degree, I can relate. Because growing up in the whitest city in America, Portland, Oregon, there were many instances where I was the only Asian in a thing. And I'll be pissed as fuck too if I find out that the only reason why I made a soccer team or got a corporate job was because to fill some Asian quota. And now that I've left my job and I've gone all in on this channel to build the next big middle ground media company, I've been hiring too, and my approach has been to focus on diversity of thought. And what I found is that when I did exactly that, the diversity of race or what we look like naturally followed. Okay, but as you can see, except women, we're still working on that. Our team's still a sausage fest. And so help us in our mission by subscribing and signing up to our newsletter where we tackle the latest news stories without bias. And if you don't care about all that, then if YouTube gets you right, you'll like this video too.